The sharp click of a padlock slamming shut echoes across my own gate. Gravel crunches under the boots of some renegade as he walks off, leaving me caged on land that should be my refuge. Diesel fumes from idling trucks linger in the mountain air, trucks now barred from returning home. Picture this: a stubborn, 58-year-old widower who has spent his whole life defending this ground, living quietly on property passed down from his grandfather. Then along comes Victoria with her clipboard and smug little smirk, declaring my cabin unfit and quite literally locking me inside the very community I've called home. That was her mistake. What Victoria and her allies didn't bother to investigate was that weather-beaten concrete bridge everyone depends on, the only road in or out for 47 upscale homes. Every inch of it belongs to me. Now tell me, how would you react if your neighbors tried to imprison you on your own land? Ever been cornered by an HOA? Share your revenge tale below. My name is Ezra Blackwood. And half a year ago I believed I had already endured the worst. My wife Margaret, my partner for 40 years, was gone, leaving a Colorado-sized void in my chest. Like any shattered man, I fled, packed up our suburban Denver life and retreated to my grandfather's old cabin in Pine Ridge Estates, where the scent of pine needles and frost still clings to the land he left behind. Scattered across the mountainside sit 47 expensive homes, all tied to the outside world by one narrow concrete bridge. My bridge, though I hadn't yet realized it. Most of the people here are weekend visitors or retirees playing mountain man in designer flannel. A handful of us stay year-round, tending our own lives. Once, we had a simple, neighborly HOA that covered snow plowing, had being the key word. Then came Victoria Thornfield, 52. Fresh from Denver, dragging along her smug attorney husband Marcus and their arrogant son Bradley, who eyed my acres like they were a prize waiting to be claimed. Victoria carried one unshakable conviction. She was destined to rule lesser folks. Rumor had it she wanted my land for some developer's vanity project, luxury condos with mountain views. Within 6 months, she had wormed her way into the whole presidency. Our campaign: raising community standards. Translation: erasing anyone who didn't fit her tidy suburban vision. I'll never forget the sound of her heels clicking across my wooden porch that first day. Cream suit, leather portfolio in hand, Bradley trailing behind her with that mocking grin. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, wasting no breath on courtesy, "I'm here to address your property compliance issues." I glanced around my grandfather's 40 acres, a hand-built log cabin, the old workshop where 3 generations had repaired everything from tractors to heartaches. Gardens that had fed us since the 1940s. "What issues?" I asked. She snapped open her folder like a prosecutor revealing evidence. The cabin, she claimed, needed repainting. The workshop, an eyesore. The gardens, unsuitable for a community of such caliber, according to her. The entire look of my land dragged down property values. Now, I'm not a man who loses his temper lightly. Margaret always said I had the patience of a saint and the stubbornness of a mule. But hearing this woman dismiss 3 generations of my family's labor. My grandfather's old rocking chair creaked on the porch as if to caution me. "This cabin has been in my family for 80 years, I said evenly. "My grandfather built it with his own hands. My father raised me here. And you want me to erase it because it doesn't fit your suburban fantasy?" Victoria's smile was as sharp as shattered glass. "Mo, Blackwood, we all have our attachments. But progress demands sacrifice. I'm sure you understand." "I understand perfectly," I told her. "The answer is no." With that, she snapped her portfolio shut. Bradley snickered behind her. "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, an official-looking envelope landed in my mailbox. Someone anonymous, of course, had reported me to Jefferson County for having unpermitted structures on my property. The county sent out an inspector, a nervous young guy who apologized more than he spoke, but still delivered the verdict. Every building needed updated permits and architectural surveys. The bitter bite of my morning coffee turned to dust in my mouth as I tallied the damaged $3,200 in fees for permits on buildings older than most of Pine Ridge's weekend warriors. That was Victoria's opening salvo. But what she didn't understand was simple: Blackwoods don't fold under pressure. My grandfather fought off claim jumpers in these mountains. My father stood toe-to-toe with crooked county men who tried to rob us of water rights. That night, in my workshop, surrounded by the weight of 80 years of family sweat and memory, it hit me Victoria Thornfield had picked the wrong enemy. Her barbs stung, sure, but I wasn't about to surrender. She thought I was just a broken old widower who'd give up and fade away. She had no clue who she was tangling with. Ever had a neighbor try to take over your life? Wait until you hear what came next. Victoria didn't rest on her permit victory. Just 3 days after I wrote that $3,200 check, she struck again, this time with a surveyor in tow. Her brother-in-law, naturally. I was nursing a fresh cup of coffee when I heard the whir of surveying equipment breaking the mountains quiet. Looking through my kitchen window, I saw him setting up his cheap transit, smirk plastered across his face on ground I knew was mine. "Morning," I called, walking out with coffee steaming in the cold air. "Care to explain why you're standing on my land?" Victoria's brother-in-law had all the accuracy of a busted compass and twice the ego. "We're resurveying community green space," he said without even glancing up. "Seems there's been some confusion about the boundaries." "No confusion here," I told him flatly. "My line runs 20 feet past that oak tree. Been that way since 1943, long before this subdivision existed." Finally, he looked at me. That same Thornfield family smirk widened like he was in on some private joke. "Well, according to our instruments, you've been encroaching on community land for years. Amazing what the right tools can reveal." The young assistant with him looked uneasy, scribbling in his notebook and darting nervous glances between us. Smart kid, he could smell the lie, even if he didn't dare say it aloud. By sundown, Victoria's brother-in-law had magically discovered that my property line had shrunk 20 feet after 80 and changed years. The next afternoon, a crew showed up to plant an 8-foot fence not along the disputed boundary, but a full 15 feet onto my land. The dull thud of posts driving into frozen soil cracked like gunshots across the mountain. Each strike felt like an attack on Margaret's memory. The fence cut off my family's trail to the hills and blocked the morning light that had warmed my workshop for generations. Psychological warfare, carried out with surgical precision. By mid-afternoon, Mrs. Holloway shuffled over, clutching a thermos of coffee and wearing the weary face of someone who'd seen too many small-town feuds. She squeezed my arm with surprising strength. "This isn't right, Ezra," she whispered. "That fence is on your land. We're with you." Then her eyes flicked toward Victoria's place, where a curtain twitched upstairs. She hurried away, as though afraid of being caught siding with me. That evening, I called Becker and Associates, the most reputable surveying firm in Jefferson County. Tom Becker himself had mapped out half the properties in court disputes around here. It cost me $800, money I couldn't spare. But by Friday I held undeniable proof. Victoria's fence sat 15 feet inside my property line. And that's where 40 years as an engineer paid off. When you've built bridges, dams, and highways, you learn a thing or two about fighting with evidence no one can dispute. The devil hides in forgotten paperwork, buried in places no one bothers to look. Infrastructure has its own memory, and that memory lives in county courthouses and dusty filing cabinets. On Saturday morning, I dug through my grandfather's old boxes in the workshop files I hadn't touched since moving back. The brittle rustle of paper uncovered something priceless, his original 1943 mining claim. Inside was a clause granting an exclusive easement for bridge and road maintenance, the very same road that serves as the sole artery into Pine Ridge. By Monday, a trip to the courthouse confirmed what those faded pages suggested. Every legal record since 1978 referenced the existing concrete bridge as standing on a private easement granted by the Blackwood estate. That bridge everyone treated as community property. The lifeline connecting 47 luxury homes to the outside world. It belonged to me. Victoria, of course, wasn't idle. By Tuesday she had called an emergency home meeting, charging me with blatant violations of community standards and pushing for a $500 monthly fine for illegal encroachment, under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights in the community center. Her presentation felt more like a corporate layoff announcement than a neighborhood meeting. She clicked through slides, her voice sharp, while most residents sat frozen, half scared of her wrath, half unwilling to get involved. Mr. Blackwood has trespassed on community green space for years, she declared. As though reading from scripture, he must pay ongoing penalties until the situation is corrected. I rose slowly, hands trembling not from fear but from holding back my temper. My voice, however, didn't waver. Victoria, I think there's been some confusion. The survey is clear, Mr. Blackwood, she snapped. It's clear all right. I walked to the front, spread out my independent survey on the table, and tapped the seal. Becker and Associates, real professionals, not your brother-in-law, document that your fence sits 15 feet inside my property line. Victoria's face flushed scarlet. That's impossible. What's impossible, I shot back, is how your brother-in-law ever earned his surveying license. Must have come from a Cracker Jack box. The room rippled with nervous laughter. Old Mr. Jenkins coughed and muttered just loud enough, "She's finally gone too far." Victoria slammed her laptop shut with such force I thought the hinges might snap. The community has voted 7-2. You have 30 days to comply or face increasing daily fines. I nodded coolly, headed for the exit, then turned back with the same smile that had unsettled contractors for 40 years. Victoria, you might want to double-check who actually owns the bridge you crossed to get here tonight. Hinted isn't the HOA. The confusion and slow realization on her face was worth every cent I'd paid in bogus permit fees. Ever had a neighbor try to steal what's yours? Just wait until you hear what I did with that bridge. Her response came fast and petty, like watching a child throw a tantrum with a law degree. By Thursday, 3 harassment campaigns were already in motion. The first, the mailbox war. A certified letter claimed my hand-carved oak mailbox built from wood harvested on my own land didn't fit community aesthetic standards. I was ordered to replace it with an approved design from Mountain Vista Landscaping within 10 days. Out of curiosity, I called the company. The owner, none other than Bradley Thornfield, Victoria's dropout-turned-mailbox-entrepreneur son. His price for the approved model, $340 for something that looked like a $40 hunk of plastic, straight out of Home Depot, complete with fancy lettering. Victoria had turned nepotism into a full-blown business model. Problem for her was, she picked the wrong man to hustle. The scent of wood stain filled my workshop that weekend as I crafted a mailbox worthy of a museum. Hand-carved mountain scenes, cedar sealed against the weather, bronze fittings, the whole package. It cost me $30 in materials and surpassed every single guideline they published. Victoria's verdict: wood wasn't refined enough for Pine Ridge's image. Apparently, actual craftsmanship now counted as a crime. Then came the garbage games, suddenly. Pine Ridge Waste Management stopped collecting my trash, citing route efficiency optimization. Conveniently, mine was the only house optimized right off the map. Tuesday mornings turned into long walks over gravel, dragging my bins to the new community dumpster, which Victoria had exiled to the farthest corner of the neighborhood. One morning, the driver, Pete, leaned close and muttered, "Mr. Blackwood," she called my boss, "threatened our contract." I'm sorry, man. After that, it was firewood. An anonymous tip claimed my stacked cords created a fire hazard. Fire Marshal Rodriguez came out, shaking his head at my neatly organized piles. "Cleanest wood stack in the county," he said. "Somebody's turning my office into their personal vendetta service." But this time, Victoria pushed too far. She started spreading gossip at Murphy's Diner, loud enough for Sarah Chen, an attorney specializing in property rights, to overhear while eating lunch. Sarah called me that same afternoon. "Mr. Blackwood," she said. I couldn't help but notice a concerning pattern of harassment. "Want to talk over coffee about your legal options?" While Victoria played petty tyrant with mailboxes, I was busy building a case. I documented every encounter like a soldier keeping a log. Recorded every phone call. Colorado is a one-party consent state, and believe me, I was that one party. I dug into 5 years of hall meeting minutes. What surfaced was Victoria's greatest hits album. The Kowalskis hounded over landscaping until they left out Mrs. Patterson driven out with bogus cat-related health violations. The Garcias badgered about their vegetable garden until they sold their home at a loss. Victoria wasn't just a bully. She was a professional predator. Then Sarah uncovered the bombshell. County records showed $180,000 a year funneled to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC for bridge maintenance. And the owner of that LLC? None other than Victoria herself. 15 years of skimming the pot to $0.7 million in total, not even counting interest. One phone call, Sarah explained, could unravel her entire scheme. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. Racketeering. The rustle of legal papers became my bedtime lullaby as Sarah laid out my nuclear arsenal. Ezra, she said, this isn't harassment anymore. This is criminal. Victoria must have felt the walls closing in, because she called another emergency HOA meeting, this time pushing a special assessment to buy me out. Her offer? A laughable $3,000. The same amount as those ridiculous permits she'd forced me to pay for legalized robbery. Wrapped in a gavel and a fake smile, the meeting room was half empty. Most folks were too intimidated by Victoria's regime to even show up, but Mrs. Holloway wasn't one of them. She stormed in like she was landing at Normandy. Flanked by the Rodriguez family and Jake Morrison. This harassment ends now, Mrs. Holloway declared, her voice carrying more weight than people half her age could muster. Ezra Blackwood is a good man, and every one of us knows it. For a second, Victoria's polished mask slipped. Mrs. Holloway, perhaps you don't grasp the seriousness of what's at stake. I understand bullies just fine, the old woman snapped back. I've been dealing with them for 83 years. The taste of impending victory was sweeter than Margaret's apple pie as I watched cracks form in Victoria's empire. Still, I stayed quiet, just jotting notes. Sometimes the best move is to let your opponent hang themselves with their own rope. Out in the parking lot afterward, Jake Morrison caught my arm. Ezra, whatever you're planning, I'm in. We've all had enough, Mrs. Holloway nodded firmly. Time to remind Victoria who actually runs this mountain. I shook their hands, my mind already circling back to that bridge and the $2.7 million she'd siphoned. Victoria thought she was playing chess with a grieving old man. What she didn't know was that she'd sat down at the board with a demolition expert. Her next move proved she'd lost touch with reality. Instead of retreating after that disastrous meeting, she doubled down like a Vegas gambler betting the mortgage on snake eyes. Monday morning, I woke to the clamor of construction, not the soft tap of a neighbor fixing a fence, but the metallic hammering of gates and electronics being bolted into place at the community entrance. By noon, Pine Ridge had its very own fortress, an electronic gate system with keypads, cameras, and a guard shack straight out of Guantanamo Bay. Victoria stood beside it, wrapped in her designer jacket, clipboard in hand, orchestrating the workers like Napoleon commanding artillery if Napoleon wore Louis Vuitton. Security upgrade, she announced to anyone within earshot. For everyone's safety, the kicker. That same afternoon, my access code mysteriously expired. I returned from a supply run to find myself locked out of my own neighborhood. The gate's red light blinked at me like a robotic middle finger, while the intercom crackled with the voice of a rent-a-cop who'd clearly been briefed. Sorry, sir. System error, he droned, sounding as sincere as a tax collector. Might take a few days to fix, maybe call the HOA president. Rage tasted metallic on my tongue as I sat there in my truck, watching neighbors cruise through with codes that worked just fine. This wasn't harassment anymore. Victoria had turned my home into Alcatraz, with me as the lone inmate. Mrs. Holloway rolled down her car window nearby, looking ready to storm the gate with nothing but a rolling pin. Ezra, this is criminal. I'm calling that woman right now. Don't worry, I said, snapping photos of everything. She just handed me a felony case on a silver platter. While Victoria basked in her electronic cage, I was already speed dialing Sarah Chen. She nearly spit out her coffee when I described the scene. She locked you out, Ezra. That's unlawful restraint. She just escalated from civil harassment to criminal charges faster than you can say stupid criminal. Deputy Martinez arrived within the hour. One look at the gate blocking my driveway and he shook his head like he'd seen every variety of human foolishness. "Ma'am," he told Victoria, "you cannot imprison a property owner on his own land. That's false imprisonment and it's a felony." Victoria's response was peak entitled Suburbia. "Officer, I'm sure you don't understand the legal complexities of HOA governance and community safety protocols. Lady, I understand handcuffs." Martinez cut her off. "Open the gate, now." I played my trump card, while Victoria was busy arguing with the deputy. Sarah was already filing emergency injunctions and notifying the Colorado Department of Transportation about the irregularities in bridge maintenance funds, and if there's one thing the DOT doesn't ignore, it's missing highway money. Within 2 days, forensic accountant Williams was tearing apart Pine Ridge's books like a coroner dissecting a suspicious body. What he uncovered escalated Victoria's petty harassment into something straight out of a federal case file. Her family had been running Pine Ridge the way the Corleones ran Vegas if the mob had worn cashmere sweaters and driven Lexus SUVs. Her brother-in-law's surveying racket. $200,000 in phantom work. Her son Bradley's landscaping company. $150,000 padded contracts. Her husband Marcus' law firm. $89,000 billed for paperwork worth $5,000 on a generous day. Add that to the siphon bridge funds, and the total theft topped $3.5 million. That night, the low drone of industrial shredders echoed from Victoria's house. Midnight document bonfire, no doubt. Too bad for her, Williams had already downloaded the entire financial archive from county servers. The community's backlash hit like a dam breaking. Jake Morrison called an emergency meeting at Murphy's Diner, and 23 neighbors showed up armed with receipts, invoices, and stories that could fill a prosecutor's dream journal. "She charged us $8,000 for emergency road work," the Garcias raged. Turned out it was just her nephew dumping gravel in a pothole. Mrs. Patterson's daughter drove in from Denver with a folder full of fraudulent bills. "Default mom paid $3,000 for new lighting," she said. The exact solar lamps were on Walmart's shelf for $89. The diner rumbled with outrage as residents realized they hadn't just been paying for Victoria's wardrobe and vacations, they'd been robbed of trust, peace, and community itself. But Victoria didn't retreat. Instead, she scheduled yet another emergency meeting, demanding the community buy the bridge rights from me for $50,000, about 1% of what she'd already stolen. By Thursday, local reporter Kate Morrison was circling, chasing leads about HOA financial fraud. The Jefferson County Tribune was lining up a front-page story, "Queen of the Mountain, How One Woman Stole a Community's Soul." Friday evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset turn the peaks to gold, thinking about my grandfather's bridge built with sweat and honesty and the empire of lies Victoria had stacked on top of it. Tomorrow night, she was going to learn what happens when you push a Blackwood too far. Then came the bombshell. Tuesday morning, a manila envelope arrived so thick it could choke a horse. Sarah called as I flipped it open, her voice trembling with barely contained excitement. "Ezra, sit down. And pour yourself something stronger than coffee. You're going to need it." The audit showed Victoria hadn't just siphoned off community funds. She'd been running a criminal operation that would make the Sopranos look like amateurs. The bridge grift was only the appetizer. The crackle of paper filled my kitchen as I spread the findings across my grandfather's oak table. Line after line of fraud jumped out. 8 years of projects, every single one inflated, falsified, or fabricated. Snow removal. Her cousin billed $40,000 a year for services worth maybe $8,000. Emergency septic repairs. Her brother-in-law's plumbing company charged $75,000 for replacing tanks that didn't even need replacing. Even the community newsletter turned out to be a racket, $15,000 a year for what was basically Victoria's personal propaganda rag. Marcus' law firm billed consultations that were little more than strategy sessions on how to perfect her scams. Bradley's landscaping business. Nothing but a money funnel, turning $20 of daisies into $500 invoices. The kid couldn't keep a cactus alive, but he could grow fake bills like weeds. The tally, $847. Zero siphon from community funds, plus $2.7 million in bridge payments. Then Sarah uncovered the real jackpot, the key that explained everything. In property records from 1962, she found the reason Victoria had targeted me from the beginning. My grandfather's original 40 acres had once included the very lot Victoria lived on. He'd lost it in a poker game to Theodore Thornfield Sr., her late father-in-law. Family lore always claimed Grandpa suspected cheating, but couldn't prove it. A busted straight against a conveniently perfect full house. The taste of a 6-decade-old betrayal hit my tongue as the puzzle locked into place. Victoria had known all along that I owned the bridge. Her vendetta wasn't about community standards, it was about revenge for a card game older than color TV, wrapped inside the biggest HOA scam Colorado had ever seen. Williams, the forensic accountant, described it best: organized crime in cardigans. A finely tuned looting machine disguised as community improvement of forged invoices, fake work orders, kickbacks hidden in legit contracts. Victoria's desperation was visible now. Marcus had quietly filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier, citing irreconcilable differences, which in lawyer speak means my wife's a crook, and I'm getting out before the cuffs snap shut. Bradley tried draining his business accounts, only to learn the IRS had already frozen them. Paying taxes on stolen money had apparently slipped his mind. The tables had turned completely. Victoria was no longer the predator picking off a grieving widower. She was a cornered embezzler staring down federal charges, civil suits, and the implosion of her stolen empire. The crunch of tires in my driveway brought County Commissioner Walsh, looking like he'd rather wrestle a grizzly than have this conversation. Hat literally in hand, he said, "Mr. Blackwood, we need to discuss Friday's meeting. There are irregularities that require attention." "Irregularities," I said, handing him coffee. "That's like calling the Hindenburg a small heating mishap. What we need to discuss is how Pine Ridge elects a new HOA board and recovers $3.5 million in stolen funds." His relief was visible from space. The county had been dodging Victoria's political strings for years. Now, finally, they had a victim willing to fight and evidence that could make a prosecutor weep with joy. Friday's meeting wasn't going to be about who owned the bridge anymore. It was going to be about Victoria Thornfield's spectacular, very public downfall. Margaret always said justice was patient. She just never told me how sweet it would taste when it finally arrived. By Wednesday morning, my grandfather's workshop had transformed into a war room that would have made the Pentagon jealous. Sarah Chen showed up at dawn with 2 briefcases full of evidence and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Ezra," she said, spreading documents across my workbench like a general mapping D-Day. "Victoria Thornfield just dealt us the legal equivalent of a royal flush. Time to shove all the chips in and watch her fold." My strike team was small but lethal. Sarah Chen, property rights attorney with 20 years of tearing corrupt HOAs to shreds; Miguel Santos, forensic accountant and ex-FBI investigator, the man who'd taken apart 3 Ponzi schemes and 1 crooked casino; Rebecca Stone, civil rights lawyer working pro bono because she'd grown up watching hometown tyrants crush decent people; and my ace in the hole, retired Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army buddy who knew every loophole in Colorado law, and a few not in the books. The workshop smelled of fresh coffee and retribution as we spread out our plan. One wall covered in property maps, another lined with financial flowcharts tracing Victoria's laundering scheme, a third plastered with 8 years' worth of timeline systematic theft mapped like a prosecutor's dream exhibit. "This isn't just about your bridge anymore," Rebecca said, pointing to the evidence, her eyes lit up like a kid tearing into Christmas gifts. Victoria had single-handedly built a textbook RICO case, classic racketeering, the kind the feds salivate over. The scheme's brilliance lay in its devastating simplicity. Legally, I could shut down the bridge tomorrow, stranding Pine Ridge as an overpriced island. The spend needed $400,000 in long-deferred repairs Victoria had been collecting funds for but apparently funneled into Botox and designer labels instead. "The beautiful part," Miguel said, punching his calculator with the rhythm of a slot machine hitting jackpot, "is that she owes you $2.7 million in bridge payments, plus $847. Zero stolen from community funds, plus triple damages under fraud statutes." We're talking over $8 million in liability. Meanwhile, Victoria was unraveling. Courthouse staff reported she'd stormed in on Tuesday, demanding to speak with someone in charge about harassment by so-called rogue lawyers. When informed the investigation was legitimate, she'd supposedly shouted about corrupt officials before stomping off in her Lexus. The community, on the other hand, was organizing with the precision of a military campaign. Mrs. Holloway weaponized her bridge club network, spreading facts faster than Victoria ever spread gossip. Coffee mornings, book clubs, and even chance run-ins at the grocery store turned into strategy sessions. "Honey," she told me Thursday, "we've been suspicious for years. Her fancy clothes while we were stuck paying emergency fees, her European vacations while the roads crumbled. We're not fools, we just needed someone willing to stand up to her." Jake Morrison had rallied. Every working-class family Victoria had ever targeted: contractors, teachers, handymen, nurses, folks who actually earned their living instead of stealing from neighbors. Maria Rodriguez brought photos of professional landscaping that was nothing more than wildflower seeds tossed on bare dirt, billed at $5,000 per yard. "She fined us for hanging laundry outside," Maria said, her nurses calm cracking with fury, called it unsightly. Meanwhile, she's stealing to pay for plastic surgery. Evenings became a chorus of typing as we compiled a mountain of evidence into a case so airtight it could have doubled as an IRS training manual. Every bogus invoice, every padded contract, every under-the-table payment cataloged with surgical precision. Our media strategy was flawless. Reporter Kate Morrison wasn't just covering a neighborhood spat anymore, she was chronicling the largest municipal fraud in Colorado history. Denver TV stations dispatched crews. A true crime podcast titled Bridge to Nowhere went into production. Victoria's political cover evaporated faster than rain in the desert. Commissioner Walsh announced a full-scale probe. The state attorney general's office started asking very pointed questions. The whir of my old printer became the soundtrack of justice as we prepared 47 identical evidence packets, one for every household, detailing Victoria's greatest hits and itemizing how much money each family had lost. Bridge inspection reports confirmed my suspicion. The structure needed immediate repairs that had never been done. Legally, I could close it for safety reasons, cutting off all access until someone came up with $400,000. Judge Hamilton Gray summed it up best as he scanned the files with professional satisfaction. "You don't need to destroy Victoria," he said. "She's already destroyed herself. All we have to do is document the blasts." By Thursday night, everything was ready. Evidence compiled. Reporters primed. Law enforcement briefed. Victoria isolated and panicking. Friday was set to be better than any Netflix premiere, only this time, the show was real. Her spiral into criminal desperation showed itself that same Thursday morning, when she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. Problem for her: she picked the wrong man to smear. The Pike Kruger, a greasy character who looked like he'd flunked the police academy twice, lasted all of 3 days digging into Ezra Blackwood before, apparently, rediscovering his conscience. Friday morning, he showed up at my door, looking sheepish enough to crawl under a rock. "Mr. Blackwood," he muttered, shifting on his feet. "I need to return Mrs. Thornfield's cash and some information you'll want." Kruger looked uneasy as he handed over the envelope. My spotless military record and engineering accolades made me look like a saint compared to the mess he'd uncovered about Victoria, but what he found was far worse than I imagined. She wasn't just a corrupt HOA president, she was a repeat offender. "Your neighbor's a serial predator," Kruger explained, sliding me a thick file. "Denver, Colorado Springs, Boulder, the same playbook every time. Take control of the HOA, hand contracts to family, bleed the community dry, then vanish when the heat gets too hot." The rustle of those papers sounded like Christmas wrapping being torn open. Page after page of former victims, each telling the same story. Different towns, same scam. But Victoria wasn't finished making reckless choices. Thursday afternoon, she tried slipping County Inspector Williams an envelope with $5.00 in cash, along with a little suggestion that my cabin might need to be condemned immediately. Williams, a stray tarot with 30 years in public service, wasn't about to play along. He reported her bribery attempt to the district attorney on the spot. "Ma'am," he told her, "I've seen desperate folks before, but this takes stupid to a new level. Expect a visit from people with badges." While Victoria was busy self-destructing, I was laying groundwork. I installed cameras around the bridge approaches and hired Peterson Engineering for a full inspection. Their findings were devastating: structural damage that should have been repaired annually, drainage failures threatening the foundation, guardrails in violation of code. Total repairs, $400,000, the exact sum Victoria had siphoned away under the guise of maintenance. The drone of Peterson's equipment echoed through the valley as they documented 8 years of neglect. Nay, that should have gone to safety. Instead spent on handbags and plastic surgery. Sarah Chen coordinated with the Colorado Department of Transportation, Securing Emergency Access Authority, CDOT, furious at learning their highway funds had bankrolled Victoria's vanity, practically begged to help. Meanwhile, her family was crumbling. Marcus packed up his law books and left Tuesday night. Bradley scrambled to offload his phony landscaping company, only to find the IRS had frozen his accounts. Even her sister Patricia resigned from the Pine Ridge board with a note that essentially said, "I refuse to go down with this ship." Victoria's last gasp was intimidation. Supporters of mine found anonymous threats in their mailboxes. Maria Rodriguez and Jake Morrison were targeted online. Their personal info smeared across fake accounts, but I had my own defenses in place. The click of my newly mounted cameras at dawn became routine, recording every desperate move. Her fatal error: underestimating Mrs. Holloway's grandson Tommy, a college kid with a knack for tech. Tommy traced the anonymous harassment right back to Victoria's home IP in 20 minutes flat. "Grandma," he announced over Sunday dinner, "your whole president really sucks at cybercrime." Digital forensics confirmed it all: fake accounts, harassing emails, phony reviews of businesses siding with me. Victoria had practically gift-trapped her guilt for the prosecutors. Then came the hammer. Deputies arrested Bradley on Tuesday for vandalizing the Rodriguez family. Car caught on 3 cameras spray painting traitors across their windshield. He pled guilty immediately, no doubt hoping cooperation might lighten the sentence looming over his mother. By midweek, subpoenas were flying like snow in a blizzard. Allies of Victoria were served, charges stacked higher by the day. Her emergency meetings went unattended, her emails unanswered, her threats ignored. What had once been a reign of intimidation had collapsed into one woman screaming into the void. The coup de grace came when she phoned the FBI to accuse me of domestic terrorism and threatening infrastructure. After listening for 5 minutes, the agent reportedly advised her to hire a very good defense lawyer. Thursday night, I sat on my porch, watching the lights blaze in Victoria's house as she shredded papers and packed through the night. Tomorrow's community meeting would be the curtain call, the final scene of her downfall. Margaret always told me, desperate people make desperate choices. What she never said was how downright entertaining it would be to watch them do it. Victoria's last week of freedom played out like a crash course in how not to handle criminal exposure. Instead of slipping quietly into the shadows like a criminal with half a brain, she went full scorched earth, determined that if she couldn't keep Pine Ridge, no one would. Monday brought her most unhinged stunt yet, an attempt to dissolve the HOA entirely. She filed emergency paperwork with the county, citing irreconcilable disputes and alleged safety concerns, claiming Pine Ridge Estates should cease to exist as a legal entity. The logic was breathtakingly stupid, in her mind. No HOA meant no embezzlement charges. Reality check: dissolving an organization doesn't erase felonies, and stolen millions don't vanish just because you scribble some forms. The reek of desperation clung to Pine Ridge like smoke from burning tires. Victoria's public behavior grew increasingly erratic. By Tuesday afternoon, she was at Murphy's Diner, yelling at the owner to stop serving enemies of the community, when Murphy calmly reminded her that feeding people was his business. She screamed about being harassed by radicals, then stormed out without paying her bill. Wednesday brought a wave of bogus 911 calls. She accused me of making terrorist threats because I'd mentioned owning the bridge at the grocery store. She reported suspicious activity when I built evidence charts in my workshop. She even claimed I was trespassing on community land while walking on my own acreage. Sheriff Martinez, after weeks of dealing with her antics, finally snapped. "Ma'am, filing false police reports is a crime. Keep this up, and you'll be arrested for abusing emergency services." Her peaceful resistance and bad decisions came when she tried to unload her mansion for 40% below market value in a desperate bid to escape before property prices tanked. But buyers evaporated the second they realized the only access road was controlled by the man she'd spent months harassing. Moving trucks soon became Pine Ridge's unofficial soundtrack. Victoria scrambled to liquidate assets, but with her accounts frozen under court order, all she could do was watch movers repossess the furniture she could no longer pay for. The media war took another ugly turn when she called Channel 7 News, spinning a sob story about being the victim of a dangerous, mentally unstable neighbor. Reporter Jessica Walsh showed up expecting a puff piece and instead walked into the biggest municipal fraud story Colorado had ever seen. On camera, Walsh asked, "Mrs. Thornfield, are you aware federal investigators have named you the prime suspect in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme?" Victoria's meltdown went viral within hours. Her shrieks about fake news and government conspiracies, delivered while standing in front of a mansion bought with stolen HOA funds, became the meme of the week, a symbol of entitled criminal denial. By Thursday, the community's revolt had reached a boiling point. Victoria marched uninvited onto my porch, still clinging to the fantasy that charm and entitlement could fix everything. Dressed in an outfit worth more than most people's cars, she said, "Ezra, surely we can work this out between reasonable people." "Reasonable people," I replied, my camera rolling. "Don't steal $3.5 million from their neighbors." That's when the mask finally shattered. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "You don't know what you've done. I'll burn this whole place down before I let you destroy everything I built." But the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. She finally understood that consequences were coming. Mrs. Holloway, passing by on her daily walk, paused to witness the collapse. With a gentleness sharper than any insult, she said, "Honey, what you built was lies and stolen money. It was always going to fall." Victoria's reply was to lash out, threatening lawsuits against everyone in sight. When I reminded her that her husband had already filed for divorce and her son was under criminal indictment, she shrieked about crooked judges and rigged systems. And so the stage was set. The final confrontation would come Friday. Friday night's emergency meeting was Victoria's final shot at spinning the story before the hammer of criminal charges came down. She blasted out emails to every household, promising to reveal dangerous forces threatening Pine Ridge. What she didn't realize was that 43 of the 47 families already had our evidence packets in hand. The shocking revelations were going to be about her, not me. The taste of looming victory was sweeter than anything I'd known since Margaret's apple pie. By the next evening, Victoria Thornfield would be staring into the eyes of the very neighbors she'd stolen from for years. Neighbors armed with proof of every last crime. That Friday, I sat on my porch, watching lights blaze in Victoria's windows as she no doubt rehearsed the lies she planned to sell. The mountain air was still, broken only by the whisper of wind in the pines and the low, steady drumbeat of justice moving closer. Margaret used to say, "Truth always finds a way." What she never said was just how satisfying it would be to watch it arrive. The Pine Ridge Community Center that night looked like the set of a small-town town hall mashed up with a public trial. 200 people crammed into a room built for 50. Regional TV crews lined the back wall with cameras, and sheriff's deputies stood at quiet attention along the edges. Victoria swept in fashionably late, pulling up in her Lexus as if she still ran the place. Dressed in a cream-colored designer suit worth more than most people's monthly mortgages, she carried herself with the brittle confidence of someone who never actually faced consequences. The air hummed with anticipation as she marched to the podium, looking like she was about to collect an award rather than walk into a firing squad of furious neighbors. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice oozing the same hollow authority she'd wielded for years. "I've called this meeting to address the malicious lies being spread against your elected leadership. And to confront the dangerous elements threatening our community's safety, the crowd's response was instant and brutal. Shouts erupted. "Where's our money, thief?" Mrs. Rodriguez rose, clutching her evidence packet like a blade. "Victoria, we know about the fake landscaping invoices. We know about the bridge money. We know about all of it." For the first time, cracks showed in Victoria's polished mask. But she pressed on, clinging to her script. "These accusations are nothing more than the delusions of a disturbed. That's enough." My voice cut through her words like a knife through silk. The room froze. Every eye followed me as I stood, holding a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. My boots thudded against the floorboards as I walked to the front. Behind me, Sarah Chen rolled in a cart stacked with evidence boxes. Miguel Santos powered up a laptop hooked to the projector. The cavalry had arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to face the crowd, "let me tell you about a bridge." From the folder, I drew my grandfather's original 1943 mining claim and held it aloft. "This deed proves my family has owned the bridge connecting Pine Ridge to the outside world for 81 years. A collective gasp swept the room. Victoria's face shifted in 3 beats: confidence, confusion, horror. "For the past 15 years, I continued, my voice steady, the Colorado Department of Transportation has been paying bridge maintenance fees to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC. That shell company belongs to Victoria," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "For 15 years, she's siphoned money that rightfully belonged to me to $0.7 million. The projector screen glowed with spreadsheets and payment records, each one a nail in her coffin. The crowd's whispers swelled into an angry roar as the sheer size of the theft sank in. "And that's only the beginning," I continued, savoring every flicker of panic crossing Victoria's face. "Mrs. Thornfield has been running a full-blown criminal operation under the guise of community improvements. Every project, every contract, every special assessment engineered to funnel your money straight into her family's pockets." Miguel stepped up, laser pointer in hand, highlighting the charts that mapped her embezzlement scheme in black and white. Total stolen from community funds, $847,000 over 8 years. Her brother-in-law's survey company, Bradley's fake landscaping empire, Marcus' bloated legal fees, all padded by hundreds of %. Victoria tried to push back, her voice shaking. "These documents are fabricated. This is a setup, a conspire." "Ma'am," Sheriff Martinez interrupted, stepping forward, handcuffs catching the fluorescent light. "You have the right to remain silent. I'd strongly suggest you use it." The room exploded in cheers as Martinez recited her rights. Charges included embezzlement, fraud, bribery, filing false reports, and racketeering. Federal prosecutors were already preparing additional counts for wire fraud and money laundering. The sharp metallic snap of the cuffs closing around her wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard since Margaret's laughter. The woman who had tried to destroy me was finally being dragged down by her own crimes. "You can't do this," Victoria screamed as deputies pulled her toward the exit. "I'll appeal." "I'll Victoria," I called after her, my voice calm. "Save your breath. You're going to need it for your attorney." The crowd's laughter chased her out of the building and into the patrol car. Camera flashes popped as journalists captured the downfall of the so-called Queen of Pine Ridge. When the noise settled, Commissioner Walsh stepped up to the podium. "Effective immediately, the current HOA board is dissolved. An interim committee will be appointed, and we will cooperate with state and federal authorities to recover stolen funds for this community." He turned to me. "Mr. Blackwood, what are your intentions regarding the bridge?" I looked out over my neighbors, people who had endured years of intimidation under Victoria's thumb. "The bridge stays open, but Pine Ridge will purchase ownership at fair market value, $50,000. That money goes straight into a community scholarship fund." The ovation lasted a full 5 minutes. Mrs. Holloway dabbed tears from her eyes. Jake Morrison raised his fist. Maria Rodriguez pulled her children close, relief written across her face. Camera bulbs flashed, immortalizing the moment Pine Ridge reclaimed its soul from the thief who nearly broke it. Outside, the patrol car disappeared into the mountain night, carrying away 8 years of corruption and fear. Justice had arrived in the form of handcuffs. 1 month later, Victoria Thornfield shuffled into Jefferson County Court in an orange jumpsuit that clashed spectacularly with her once polished image. Facing overwhelming evidence, she pled guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and bribery rather than endure a trial that would drag her reputation even further through the mud. Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army friend, presided over sentencing. He showed no mercy for tyrants who robbed their neighbors. 3 years in state prison, $3.5 million in restitution, 500 hours of community service picking up trash along highways. Marcus had already slunk back to Denver. Bradley was pumping gas at a convenience store, learning for the first time what honest work felt like. And where Victoria's mansion once loomed, the sound of children's laughter now filled the air. The community had bought the foreclosed property and transformed it into something far better than she ever built. The land that once held Victoria's mansion became Pine Ridge's first public park, complete with playgrounds, picnic tables, and a memorial garden dedicated to honesty in governance and the power of neighborly cooperation. The bridge restoration turned into the community's proudest project. Weekends were filled with volunteers pouring concrete, sanding rails, and painting beams. Jake Morrison directed the construction like a seasoned foreman. Mrs. Holloway coordinated meals for the crews, while Maria Rodriguez's nursing background proved invaluable for patching up the inevitable scrapes and bruises. The newly elected HOA board voted in on a platform of transparency, introduced radical changes, competitive bidding, open financial records, and monthly meetings that actually included resident voices. The results were jaw-dropping. Projects Victoria once priced at $50,000 were now being completed for under $8,000 by honest contractors grateful for straightforward work. Within 6 months, property values jumped 15%. Word spread quickly. Pine Ridge had gone from a cautionary tale of corruption to a model of grassroots democracy. New families were eager to move in, drawn to the promise of financial accountability and genuine community. Demand for homes skyrocketed, with waiting lists longer than supermarket checkout lines during a blizzard. As for me, the shift was unexpected. My grief-driven isolation had transformed into reluctant leadership. Neighbors came to me for advice on everything: contract disputes, zoning headaches, even local politics. My grandfather's old workshop evolved into a gathering place where problems were solved face to face, the way communities used to function. The smell of fresh coffee and the sound of laughter replaced the bitterness left behind by Victoria's reign. Somewhere along the way, Sarah, Mrs. Holloway's widowed sister, and I found ourselves spending more time together. We shared stories of loss and resilience, and discovered that sometimes life offers second chances when you least expect them. The ripple effect of Bridgegate spread far beyond our mountains. Law schools used the case as a study in property rights. The Colorado legislature passed the Pine Ridge Act, mandating financial audits and background checks for all HOA board members. Communities across the country reached out, seeking advice on how to stand up to their own petty tyrants. A documentary filmmaker, Rebecca Martinez, secured the rights to her story, titling it The Bridge to Justice. Every cent of the advance went straight into the scholarship fund, which had already put 3 Pine Ridge kids through college on full rides. In a strange twist of fate, Victoria's theft ended up fueling the future she tried to rob. Without her intimidation tactics, local businesses flourished. Murphy's Diner became the beating heart of the town, hosting monthly democracy dinners where residents debated local issues over home-cooked meals. Turns out, good governance wasn't just fair, it was good for the economy. Victoria herself was released after 18 months for good behavior. She was banned from serving on any board or nonprofit, reduced to renting a small studio apartment and working a retail job. Once feared, she had become a cautionary tale of unchecked power, greed, and inevitable fall. Meanwhile, Pine Ridge thrived. On one crisp evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset turn the peaks gold when the phone rang. Another call for help from Arizona, this time. A community fighting HOA corruption tied to water rights. Mrs. Holloway, now Pine Ridge's democratically elected president, dropped by with a fresh apple pie. "Ezra," she said with a knowing smile, "they need you." We've got things under control here. I looked out at the bridge, its railings gleaming in the fading light, connecting homes where neighbors now worked with one another instead of scheming against each other. What do you think, Margaret? I whispered to the breeze. Her answer came in the laughter of children playing in what was once Victoria's garden, their joy echoing over water flowing freely beneath an honest bridge. It was time to help another community discover what Pine Ridge had learned: the little guy can win if he fights smart, not angry. Share your whole nightmare story below. Your experience might be the spark that helps someone else fight back. Subscribe for more tales of ordinary people standing up to corrupt authority. Because sometimes, justice doesn't wear a robe, it wears work boots and carries a surveyor's kit.